Okay. All right. Greetings. Hello, everyone.
Reasons.
Yeah.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
There you go, Ion. I can see you're unmuted now.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Right. Well, listen, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're here presumably because something about what the work that we're doing here attracted you to
Yes.
it, and
Yes.
yeah, very pleased to have you. Yeah.
Recently, I felt I don't know if I described it to you, Pierce, when we first chatted. I felt this increasing call, if you will, or something in the middle of the night, during the day, throughout multiple different occasions, have felt this desire for something, and I believe I have found it again.
Yeah.
It was very interesting how it came about, just out of the clear blue.
Okay. First of all, did you see the post? It was just this morning. Did you see the post on the site? If not, I want to read it to you because I believe that it really sets the stage. Okay, are we good? I'll do that.
Yeah.
And again, you'll have to forgive my,
You
got
your glasses.
Yeah. I got bifocals, and they don't really work because if I want to read something, I have to I don't think it transitions at the right place, but in any event, okay. And it's an excerpt from The Golden Chain, which is an alchemical text written roughly around the early 1700s, bounced around Europe and that sort of thing. But there's one particular part of it that really struck me as highly relevant for today and what we're engaged in. Okay, so I'll read it. The whole of nature and creatures, therefore, consist of two basic origins: the doer or the mover, who is a spiritual being, and the moved or sufferer, passive recipient, who is a tangible or corporeal being in regard to his moving spirit. Explanation: air is the passive recipient, suffering, and is corporeal relative to fire, which is the subtlest and most effective element. Water is tangible and corporeal, moved and made effective by the air, which, relative to water, is an active spiritual being. Earth is moved, impregnated, moistened, and fertilized by water, which, relative to earth, is a moving and active spirit. But everything, as already mentioned, is originally made effective by the universal world spirit. Since the effects of nature occur only according to the created properties of natural things, while art must faithfully follow nature and cannot achieve anything useful without her, all practical investigation of nature undertaken without a preliminary correct knowledge of the universal world spirit and the created properties of those natural things in which is done must turn out as foolish and fruitless. But whoever perfectly understands this active spirit and the above mentioned law of motion in all types of creatures in relation to the differences proper to them will also recognize the lawgiver in his infinite wisdom, his eternal omnipotence, his eternal justice, and his eternal mercy. He will possess natural science perfectly and is on the highest level of Hermetic philosophy. And even if it seems impossible to some to climb to the highest level, the natural scientist, eager to learn and be reborn in the light of grace, should not lose courage and confidently start investigating. He should not, however, take anything in hand without knowing it, or making something of it without knowing what, as the sophists do, without knowing what it is, as the sophists do. I'll paraphrase there, right? It didn't come out right. Instead, to begin with, he must choose one thing only, not several at a time, as the object of his studies and investigations. Above all, he must get to know it inside and out, then only make use of it what is possible according to its inherent law of motion. This is really touching on wrong manufacture, isn't it? Right? Or the potential for wrong manufacture, yeah? Neither must he stop working till he has completely investigated it, knows it perfectly, and has thereby obtained the final natural goal he had set for himself. For it is not in the multiplicity that the art consists, says one of our greatest teachers, and with him the entire host of master sages, but afterward he can proceed with the investigation of something else, in which he will already succeed more easily, because every creature is considered a book of nature, as the very fine saying of our philosophers is to be understood, namely, that one book opens and explains another. I was talking about groundwork. In this way, he can imperceptibly reach the highest level of Hermetic wisdom sooner than one can imagine. For the whole of nature resembles a circular chain, the links of which uh, bind exactly together. When then an enlightened spiritual man, by his studies and investigations, has finally come to perfectly know the first link, it will be easy for him to expand his knowledge from this to the second, from that to the third, and so on, from one link to the next, through the whole circle. And nature, this faithful servant of the Lord, will herself guide an eager investigator, truly reborn in the light of grace. Yeah, right? So
Yeah.
the reason I wanted to read that is because it speaks of something, several things actually, but it speaks of this idea of investigating something, right? Get into something and continue to work it, continue to rub against it until you understand it, you see, because it will reveal the natural laws. Now, I had sent an email. I got a couple of responses back. I had sent an email asking you to go get a couple of supplies. Right? Did you, were who was able, who wasn't? Were you able to get them? Okay, right. So got
We
one up.
are. The only thing we didn't get round to getting was the galvanized nails.
Okay, right.
So that's
You
still on the shopping list.
Sure. You can also use screws. Okay, I'm going to show you an example. You can also use screws. Yeah, could you see that? It's dripping
Uh-huh.
with water. Dripping with water. So,
Right.
but
Yep.
they're a bit easy also to use. Let's make sure it goes back in the right spot here. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you the instructions on it today, but only after we go through what's on the board up here, because it's going to exactly explain, and you'll be able to prove to yourself everything that's on the board up here. Now,
Okay.
the way that we've worked in the past is I draw something on the board, I explain it, right? We record it, it gets archived in our library. You go, that's really interesting. Yeah. Or I feel the enormity of it. Yes. Or
Yeah.
I kind of see what Pierce is talking about. And then a week or two goes by and I draw something else on the board and something else on the board and something else on the board. And eventually the things get forgotten about, don't they? They get
Yeah.
kind of muddled in with all of the, well, we've got over 100 hours of video up there on the site now, don't we? So, in I've determined that this is not the most intelligent way to work. Right? We're not in a college setting where you have to learn, formulas, or you have to learn equations, or and so on and so forth. Those types of things. What I want you to be able to do is to be able to do, right? When you get your ice cube tray, when you get your nails or your screws, whatever the case might be, when you get your copper wire, uh, and you see what this does, and then you think back to this, you're never going to forget it, right? Because you're going to be able to, let's say that all the videos go away, you don't remember this diagram, but you still have your ice cube tray, yeah, and your screws and your copper wire, and your multimeter or your LED or whatever the case is. You can get back to it. You can work it out again because it's part of you. It's something you've done with your hands. Now, one of the promises of this way is that it's quicker than most ways. And the reason for that is because we don't just work with one center at a time. Yeah, we've talked about the different kinds of ways in the past, haven't we? Where you've got the way of the thinking, right? The moving center way. You can put it in the terms of calcination, dissolution, and separation if you like. But those are other ways. Yeah, you assume a position and hold it for 10 years, and you develop a rather lopsided astral body. Because of the discipline, the rigor that you've gone through, it will develop that, but it'll develop a lopsided astral body. You see, and then someone has to carry you over to another school, and then you emote for another 10 years, and someone then, now you've got a 2/3 developed lopsided astral body, and they bring you over to another school, and then they teach you how to think for a while. You see, that's 30 years. If you do it all together, you can do it in much less time. That's the prospect that's available. And so with your ice cube tray and your screws and your wire, you're going to do something with your moving center. You're going to actually physically do it with your body, right? Because you've got to wrap the wires and put the darn thing together. You'll take measurements with your multimeter. All right, that's going to involve the thinking center, and you're also going to think about how it applies to this. And don't forget to include yourself. Right? Understand that you are not a physicist at this point. You are an alchemist. It's a sacred act, what you're trying to do. You're trying to understand something phenomenal that happens when you mix various metals. Two different kinds of metals, one positive, one negative. Yeah. If you haven't figured it out already, you're making electricity here, okay? Making DC voltage. You're literally making electricity. Okay, so this is the premise. This is the premise of why we're doing it this way, because it's been tried so many different ways in the past, and I just don't see it as having really worked for people. Do you? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to take the sentiment of alchemy. All right, and I'm going to work with the sentiment behind why alchemy exists as a particular way, but we're not always going to be mixing chemicals. Okay, sometimes I'm going to borrow something from electronics, sometimes I'm going to borrow something from music, right? Music theory, or from anything. Okay, all of these sorts of arts that we can incorporate and go, you know what, this is a really good way to show this law in motion. Back in the early days, 70s, 80s of the Eamon, people were encouraged to get a notebook, right, and go out with their notebook and their pen and start collecting examples of the law of two, as an example. Day, night, man, woman, dusk, dawn, on and on and on, right? Positive, negative, all of these types of things. And the idea behind that was that if you did it enough, if you cast yourself enough into trying to find examples, eventually you would create a tuning fork signal, right? Where the laws would then begin to resonate with you, and you would become, for example, the sacred triangle, as an example, yeah, or become the law of two. Once you become the law of two, or have embodied it, you begin to create this signal in the astral light, yeah, and other laws go, oh, that's like my cousin, the law of two, right? And the law of three comes to you and says, here's a bit of intel on me, right? I know you, I recognize you. And the law of four, and the law of 5, and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, okay? And then the other ones that are conglomerates. You see, this is how it works, though. They all begin to aggregate around you because of the work that you've done with this. Now, well, how do I put this in the most spiritual way possible? Jotting down examples is fucking boring and daft, okay? It will get you there, but good God, I mean, it is such a difficult way to go about it, yeah? When you can just do something like demonstrate it to your own complex, demonstrate it to your brains, demonstrate it to your centers in one shot, and you don't need a notebook. this can be your only example. You don't need to have scads and scads of notebooks filled with black, white, yes, no, left, right, man, woman. Yeah. All right. At least it was for me. I mean, I did it, but phew, goodness gracious. Can't ask you all to do that. If you haven't done it, good. Okay. Because something in you just probably rebelled against it anyway. said, no, this is torture, right? This kind of work isn't supposed to be torture. Okay.
Yeah.
There is going to be, you're going to have to work to connect to what's on the board here. All right. And we're going to go through it bit by bit. And I'm going to bring up a couple things that are a bit puzzling. And it's those puzzles that you're going to then solve with your ice cube tray experiment. All right. Because I've decided to take the sentiment behind alchemy and use it as a way to teach way, I have to have some respect for some of its principles. One of those principles is that you don't really teach it. You teach the basics, but you give a man or a lady the ability to go figure it out and learn it for themselves. Okay, so it's not going to be Pierce up here saying, this is the law of 4, this is the law of 3, right? Memorize these kind of aspects to it, and then you know it. You're going to have to do that work. I'll make you aware that there is a law of 4 and a law of 3. Okay, you'll be aware of those sorts of things. I'll give you a little bit on it, but the big part of the work, I mean, it's actually a sin, isn't it, to take away a man's work or a lady's work, right? Don't ever do that. Mind if I divert for a second? Don't ever take away someone else's work in any aspect of their life. That should be one of the silver rules, right? And the golden rule that goes with that is don't give anybody advice. That would be the gold rule that goes with it. Yeah? Don't ever give anyone advice. Because here's the thing, I will divert for a minute because this is important and it does tie in, you'll see. If you give someone advice, there has to be an overarching agreement between the two of you. And that overarching agreement is this, that they then become your disciple. In other words, that whatever you advise them, they have to do. Okay? And you take on the responsibility for the outcome of the advice you give in their life. And so if they do it and everything, what's your expression there in the UK? Everything goes, what is it?
It's rude expression. I can't say it.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But everything goes haywire. I'll use ours. Right? Haywire, that expression.
I'll just get, hang on, I'll just get permission.
Yeah.
Can I say it?
Yeah. Just
When it goes tits up.
Okay, tits up, sure. Yeah. Tits up, haywire, whatever the case is. Yeah. It's then your responsibility to go into their life and make amends.
Yeah.
Don't give advice, right? And the silver side to that is what? Don't do another man's work. Yeah, don't do another person's work for them. So what I'm saying to you is that I won't put myself in a position to do your work, and I won't put you in a position of me giving you advice. All right, we're all friends here. I'm going to show you some things that I've done that I think have turned out rather clever in this way, and we'll go from there. All right, and if this doesn't work, I have the liberty to change it up. I can do that. Okay, because what's important to me is that you get it. Yeah, let's stop wasting time. Let's get there. Let's just get there already. Okay, together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just
right.
to put something that occurred to me about that, writing down all those examples of the Torah 2, which I resisted. It comes back to the sentiment of why a person's gathering them.
Yeah.
Are they gathering it to get the intelligence of it, or are they gathering them to fill up the book so that if anybody says, "Have you filled your book up?" you can go, "Yeah." It's in the sentiment and the reasoning and the value as to why I'm doing it.
Right, it's true. And let me put it this way. I'm not knocking it because it can and does work.
Yeah.
All right. But if you look over here, I'm not going to make the camera follow me, but you can see that I have a burner here, probably. Trust me.
Yeah,
if
I
you
can
can't
see it. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me if you can't see it, but I have a burner there and it plugs into an outlet in the wall. And I have an ice maker here, right, that I've taken the basket out of and put a fish tank pump in there so that it pumps cold water, right? It keeps making ice, cooling off the water, and it pumps cold water through my distiller here. I didn't go down to the lake time after time and get cold buckets of water to make sure that the condenser is working. You see, I didn't light a fire in my basement, yeah, and stoke it with bellows. Right now, you might think, oh, Pierce, that's not real alchemy. Well, it is, because I'm using what's available. Okay, but I'm still in it. I'm still in the experiment. I'm still in the process of it. If I plug it into an outlet, it's okay. All right. They didn't have outlets back then. Otherwise, they would have done the same thing. Now, where I'm going with this is this notion that you have to fill a notebook. I mean, do you even have a notebook? Or would you have to go look hard? All right. Would you have to go actually buy a notebook? I know you do, Hannah, because I see you writing in it. Okay. But you know, we live in a more modern time. So why not, if something else works better or is more expedient, why not use it? All right. That's all. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Okay. In your notebook, please copy down this chart. All right. If you don't have a notebook in front of you, I will take a picture of the board and throw it up on the where the video is. Okay, so that you can
It is
do it.
quite small.
It is. Okay, I'll go through bit by bit. I'll go through it bit by bit. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, can you zoom your camera, or is that not?
Yeah,
not
let me
gonna work?
try. Okay, we'll do this and see if it picks me
Zoom
up.
it in. Yeah.
There we go.
There you
Oh,
go.
that helps.
Maybe
better?
one more, and that'll be perfect.
I can't zoom in one more.
Max zoom. Okay. Yeah, this is.
All right. I'll go through it and it'll make sense. Okay, fine. Yeah. The goal here is to be able to do this from memory because you know it, not because you memorized it. All right. And so I'm going to give you the lesson on this. And then maybe, well, I won't erase the board because then I won't be able to take a picture of it. But the idea is that after this meeting, I hope you can go sit down and redraw this from memory. Okay, because you understand the principles behind it. All right, and get it right. That's all I ask. It doesn't mean that you memorize it. It means that you have a connection to it. Okay. And I'll probably use this side to give you bigger symbols if you can't see the symbols that well. So at the very top, I've got the letter P. And this stands for the prime. It could be the letter A. I could have called it absolute. Okay, but it is the first thing, the one thing that's talked about in alchemy. And if you've gone through my things on, like when we've done the numerology aspects of the laws, then you'll understand this idea of one dividing into two, which is what it does next. On the left side, you've got the word fixed, and there's a line going down to the word fixed. And on the right side, if you're looking at it directly, you've got volatile. Okay, so fixed, volatile. Yes?
Pierce, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you were to describe this view, I'm just trying to picture it in my head. You know, when you say, "Hey, remember this," I'm trying to think. You know,
Right.
remember blah, like a one word. Like, what would that be? for this representation.
sure.
I'm not putting you on a spot. I'm just saying, help us remember that.
The technical word would probably be tetractics. All right.
I'm not gonna remember that.
It's okay.
Tic-tac-tricks, okay.
Listen. It's not about memorize. It's about connecting to the essence of it, of how 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 3. So the 1243 diagram. How's that? Does that work? Now we'll come up with a
Let me
name.
think. Yeah, either I'll come up with the name as we're going through to see if
There
I
you
can
go.
describe it,
Yeah.
or we'll come up with it too, and I'll just blurt it out, and then you can say,
Sure.
"No,
That's
Sachin,
fine.
this is crap," but that's fine.
Well, you can come up with it after we've gone through it and be like, yeah, that's the word for it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the absolute or prime, okay, fixed, volatile. Those are the 2 first forces that it creates. It creates something. It creates this notion that something is either compressed or expanded. And now you're probably saying, I remember this idea from the atrium work. Yeah. You've got diamond, star ruby, and star sapphire. Okay. Remember that? It all ties in anyway.
Yeah.
Under fixed, you've got 2 lines again. Okay. Underneath one, there's earth, and underneath the other, there's water. All right. So earth, water, underneath fixed. Under volatile, you've got air on the left and fire on the right.
Okay. What are the words against those diagonal lines that point?
Like these little ones?
Yeah.
Dry, wet, wet, dry. We'll get to that in a minute.
Right. Okay.
Good eye, though. And this is cold and this is hot. Okay.
Mm.
The symbol for Earth is a downward pointing triangle with a line through it. One way to remember this, because it's similar to the symbol for water, but the letter E has a central line. Okay, so if you remember that Earth and water are both in the fixed category, then the downward pointing triangle with the line through it is Earth, because it's like an E. Okay. The symbol for water is just a downward pointing triangle with no line through it. The symbol for air is an upward pointing triangle. And just like the letter A, it also has a line through it. These would be mnemonics, ways to remember this. Okay. And then you've got fire, upward pointing triangle with no line through it. All right. Now, can you already close your eyes and remember what each of those are? Because of the downward pointing triangle with a line through it is which one? Because it has a line through it.
Yeah.
Because it has a line through it and it's downward pointing. Which one is it? Which element? Earth. There you go. Right. Upward pointing triangle with a line through it is what? Air. Right. Because it's got the line like the letter A. Yeah. Okay. And you can figure out the other ones, right? Because you would know that fire travels upward and water travels downward. That's why they're triangles going up when going down. Right? When something burns, it burns upward. When you drop water, it goes to its lowest place. Which is why I'm quite intelligent over here, by the way, because I have water going on here, you see, and my power source, you can't see it because it's off camera, but my power source is actually higher up than the level of water, just in case I bump something. It's not going to go down, right? The water's not going to go down and spark out on the electricity. Now, do you think that was an alchemical thought when I decided to do that? Of course it was.
So yes, it was.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. You're using the laws. Right? Water's going to go down. Electricity is down there. Keep water and electricity apart. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Now, underneath this, underneath the earth and water, I want you to draw a T. All right, a T shape like this, connecting the two, saying that those two are together. And underneath that is salt. And we'll get into what salt, sulfur, and mercury are. But salt, think of it this way, is a combination of earth and water. Nah, this is going to be a mystery already. Right? And the symbol for salt is a circle with a line through it. I don't have a great mnemonic, but there's only 3 of them to remember, so I think you'll get there, right, with it. Okay. Now, underneath water and air, in other words, the middle two, draw another T, and under that is mercury. Now you'll notice with this that you've got water with no line through it, downward pointing triangle, air with a line through it, upward pointing triangle. Together, these kind of balance each other out and create something called mercury. But there's an imbalance in there, right? Because it's not as strong as, say, fire and water, for example. Yeah, got an imbalance. And the symbol for Mercury is also the astrological or planetary symbol for Mercury, which is a circle, right, with a T below it. In other words, it's the it's the opposite of Mars in a certain respect, but circle with a T below it and horns. All right. You know what the symbol means, right?
Well, it's got a feminine aspect to it. It's got horns on it. What?
We'll do another one on the nature of symbols. All right, we can probably spend a year just doing that. But the idea, the physical below the spiritual. Okay, spiritual being the circle, physical being this way. The old way of drawing Mars was a circle below and a cross above. Just the opposite. Then it became the horns, and then it became the circle with the arrow coming out of it, like this, the shield and spear. Rome did that. It's not right. Okay, so Mercury connected with fire. Water and air. Then all the way to the right, connecting another T, connecting air and fire, you've got sulfur. The symbol for sulfur is a triangle above with a cross below. Triangle above, cross below. Okay? Now, you've already had an intro to the law of 2, the law of 4, and the law of 3. And they do actually go in that order. You'd think it goes 2, 3, 4, but it's actually 4, 3. Do you remember? Let's erase this. I'll come back to it, okay? Here you are. Who can remember this from, I think it was last week or the week before? Hot, cold, wet, dry. You've seen this before, right? This is the way the law of 4 works. The law of 4 is really a duplicate of the law of 2 with one vector shifted. All right. One intact, one shifted, I think is what it even, or one split. One split, one intact. This is the way the Journey, I think volume 1 puts it when it talks about the law of 2. Yeah, the 7 levels of the law of 2. What's meant by that is if you set out and you start walking west, at what point in time will you end up east? At what point in time will you end up walking east? It's a better way to say that.
You might.
Never, right?
Yeah.
You'll never end up walking east because you're continuing to walk west. That's the vector that's intact, always intact in that way. The one that's split is if you start walking north, eventually you'll end up walking south.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one that's split. All right, so you've got this, you've got hot, cold. That's 1 bar, and hot and cold is really what? It's just a measure of how much kinetic energy is in something. Yes, if something is hot, it's really moving. Yeah, it's moving inside, like you understand, right? The molecules are all kind of vibrating inside. If something's cold, they're not. Absolute zero, I think, is the point when everything stops moving except for the electrons and whatnot. But the molecules are not bumping up against each other at that point. So This is a measure of how much energy, and realize that it's a scale. You can have something here, you can have something here, 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 anywhere along this bar. All right. Wet and dry is really it's a measure of whether something shears or conforms, I think would be the right way to say it. Yeah. If I pour a glass, or if I pour water into a glass, all right, it's going to conform to the glass, isn't it? If I take this same amount of water and freeze it into a brick and then try and shove it into the glass, well, the glass is probably going to shear, but you get the idea that in order to get it all into the glass, if it's not that exact shape, then I'm going to have to break it. I'm going to have to shear it. I'm going to have to, crack it up until it fits in there. That would be the definition of wet and dry. It's not necessarily whether it's water, it's how conformable it is. It's whether or not it has to shear if it's dry, because you can say ice is dry in this context because it would have to shear, you see, to get in there. Water is wet, okay? So it's conformability. Now you've got two aspects of the law of two intersecting one another that looks like the law of four. Looks like the law of four. What I mean is fire, let's do it this way. Get you used to it. Fire is the hot and dry vector, the middle of the hot and dry. Okay? Cold and dry is what? Who knows that symbol now? That's right there.
Earth.
Anyway. Earth, yeah.
Earth,
Yeah, cold and dry. Cold and wet. Water. And warm and hot. Air. Okay? That's why I say they appear this way, because their most fundamental aspects is whether it's hot, cold, wet, or dry. You with me so far? I'm off camera. Sorry about that. You with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, right. They sit in the middle. They sit in the middle here. And you'll notice that in the upper half, you've got the upward pointing triangles. And then in the lower half, you've got the downward pointing triangles. All right. And they're each opposite each other. So you've got fire and water. This is why fire and water appear to be completely opposite. And earth and air, we'll get into why they are opposite, but this is why they appear to be opposite. This is the idea that you've heard of before of apparent opposites versus adjacents. Something that's adjacent. Okay, this solves that mystery a bit. Right. So here's where it gets interesting. Take Earth, for example. Go back to this diagram here. And Earth is what? Which two aspects?
Cold and dry.
Cold and dry, right? So for Earth, you can say, I'll erase these, cold, dry, C, D. All right, I'll just put those in parentheses. Water is what?
Cold and wet.
Wet, cold.
Cold and wet, right? So put CW. Now, air.
Hot and dry.
Hot and wet. And fire, hot and dry.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. Hot.
Yeah. Okay. This is where things start to get interesting. Because on this side, the common denominator is cold. All right. On the fixed side, Earth is cold and dry, water is cold and wet. But the common denominator between Earth and water is its coldness. Yeah. The common denominator over here is its hotness. Air is hot and wet, fire is hot and dry. So you can say that these two, the fixed and volatile, carry within them the intrinsic nature of hot and cold. So my first puzzle, my first question for you is, where does wet and dry come from? Because it's not shown here, right? I don't want you to answer this now. I want you to jot it down as this is something I need to puzzle as I think about this diagram and as I work with my ice cube tray. All right, where does the wet and dry come from? It's not in the diagram. Do you see that, right? You've got hot and cold, common denominator for hot and cold here, but somehow wet and dry just kind of mysteriously shows up and it's not symbolized, not represented there. And when you answer this question for yourself, will you be able to redraw this diagram in a more accurate, more correct way? Okay, yeah, something to work on, something to puzzle on. Remember, I can't do your work for you. I did a lot of it to get to this point because you'll never read any of this in a book, will you? With the way it shuffles out. Okay, now in the terminology of alchemy, salt is the negative aspect, sulfur is the positive aspect, and mercury is the neutral. So now we've got the law of three, and you've heard of this positive, negative, neutral, right? We've had lessons on this before, positive, negative, neutral. Yeah. So what's positive?
Sulfur.
Yes. Sulfur. And what's negative?
Salt.
Mm-hmm. And neutral?
Water.
Okay. Okay. Now, how do these correspond to the aspects of you? What I mean by that is from the standpoint of your body, your spirit, and your soul. It's interesting, isn't it? Right? From the standpoint of we go around all the time saying, I did this, I went for a walk, I went to the store, I love you, I, right? But then when you talk about your body, you say, oh, my hip aches, my hip aches. Right? You talk about your body from the standpoint of an ownership. And you do that with soul and spirit too, don't you? Right? My soul leaves my body at death. You'll say it, right? My spirit left my body. Or the spirit that dwells within me. You see, it's always this kind of external thing. I'm taking a bit of a tangent here because it does relate to the work, obviously, doesn't it? Yeah. Somehow we know that those aren't us, but we have this assumption that something is us. What's that ingredient? You'll be able to answer that, by the way, soon. Mercury. Do you want a bit of a hint here? Mercury is the spirit in you. Representative. I should say the representative of Mercury in you is your spirit. It's the neutralizer between your soul and your body. If you take this whole idea of the cosmic triangle here, you can get to a lot of work in there. Now, the mercury in an alchemical experiment is alcohol, ethanol, I should say. If you're talking about the plant world, I have I love this work, right? Upstairs, I have a jug. And you'll all have a jug of this substance soon. But I have a jug, and within it, it's just sugar water, okay, and yeast. Do you know what it's doing? And I've got a little airlock on top. It's an airlock is like a little cap that has water in it and a little hood on it, right? It sits like this. And so what happens is when gases come up, they are trapped under the water. They have to bubble out through the water so it doesn't allow any air back in. Making ethanol. I'm making mercury in the plant kingdom. Now, let me ask you a question. Had I instead of just sugar water used grapes, what would I get something different in the mercury aspect?
Yeah.
You know, no, you wouldn't. You still get ethanol. Ethanol is ethanol is
Yes.
ethanol. Whether you
No,
make
no.
it with potatoes, whether you make it with wheat, whether you make it just with sugar water, sugar cane, that sort of thing, it's always going to be ethanol. A little bit of methanol in there too, which you're not legally supposed to distill this ethanol out. Okay, so I'm not going to encourage any of you to distill it out when you get to that point. But if you decide to do that, you're going to have to get rid of the methanol. It doesn't fit. It'll make you blind if you drink it. Okay. But the point is this: is that the spirit of every plant, its mercury, is the same for every plant. When you make ethanol, when you make alcohol from plant-based materials, it's the same ethanol in sugar as it is in corn, as it is in a potato, and so on and so forth. Now, what does that tell you about the human spirit? This will give you vast. I'm teaching you how to work, not what to think. Teaching you how to work in this regard, okay? What does that tell you about the human spirit?
Would it be the same for everyone?
Yes, yes, Hannah.
It's a
the
mercury
same.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's the same. Sachin, your spirit is the same as mine. Okay. Now,
Or made of the same things.
made of the same
Or
thing. Huh.
yeah, I guess you could say it's the same because that's at its molecular level or its constituent level, it's made of the same thing, but it's also got my own influence and my own sort of because the spirit is mixed with the soul and the body, that is different.
Okay.
And
Now we'll get to the soul.
why
Now we get to the soul. All right. The soul is what's different. If we could, and let's not do this, right? Because I'm not ready to go just yet. But if we could distill ourselves into spirit, soul, and body, your spirit, my spirit would be indistinguishable, but my soul and your soul would be very distinguishable. The soul in something is its oils, the sulfur. Ah, fuck, I gave it away. The sulfur, okay? doing your work for you. The sulfur is in the plant kingdom would be like the essential oils. If I distill out oregano oil, it's going to be different than basil. It's going to be different than rosemary. It's going to be different than anything else. This is where the differences come in, right? And this is why you can come to the idea, for example, that the sun is where the spirit comes from because it shines the same for everybody, whereas the soul is a coding from the position of the planets at the time of your conception plus the time of your first inhale. It's what taints you as oregano versus mint. That combination in there. A couple lessons ago, I said we work with correspondences. Actually, it was about a year ago. I'm sorry. About a year ago, I said we work with correspondences. I said, actually asked you to remember this, right? That when you're working with correspondences, like for example, if I'm making ethanol, all right, I'm considering what's going on with my own spirit, with my own spiritual aspect. When I'm making essential oil, a rosemary or something, considering the aspects of the soul. It's not that it's doing anything to my soul unless I'm there. This is the difference between chemistry and alchemy, because a chemist set up a lab, go to a bar, right? Get absolutely smashed, come back, and he'll have oregano oil. But he won't have the wisdom and intelligence that goes with the correspondence of that. And Hannah, right? We talked about the herbs and their planetary influences. And this should give you one heck of a insight into astrology, really. Yeah. This should give you a pretty good indicator of how, if you knew nothing about astrology, how with a bit of this kind of information or this kind of knowledge or maybe even skill set, you could be on a deserted island and then begin to understand something like astrology or typology, people. Yeah? What sort of ingredients do they have in them? Okay, so I divert a bit here and there. It's the way I am. I'm an 8, so up and down all the time. You got it? What's the mystery you're supposed to solve?
Pierce, I just want a little clarification.
Yep.
So when you distill, so maybe I should have asked you when you were there, but I didn't want to interrupt. So when you distilled, see now I'm losing track again. So you said the mercury is the spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the indistinguishable part. And the chemicals or the salt is
the body.
Oh, body. Okay, that's because I thought the chemicals of the salt. I thought you said the chemicals of the salt is
sulfur is the soul.
soul.
Sulfur is the soul.
Ah, okay, got it. Because I thought that's what I thought I heard you say salt is.
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say salt, but okay, sulfur is fine. If I just misheard, then that's fine. That makes sense. I think the part you distill out is the volatile. It's what is going to evaporate when you actually apply energy to it, because the non-volatile part is what is going to be left.
Beautiful. Absolutely true.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
Look,
that's where you're going.
I'm going to turn over to this here again. You've seen this before. Okay. Can you see me? Okay. You've got the entire array of creation here. I've said this before. This is one of the most amazing things. You've got dough. You can understand the ray of creation from this, a distillation train. You've got dough, which is the heat, something that comes in from the outside, right? And it's been said that the sun sounds the note do in our octave for creation. You've got ray, which is Regina, has to do with the moon level. Interesting thing happens when you get up to me. Me is when you, this is where you put the, like the plants, the plant ingredients, the ground up oregano or whatever. This is the organic life of the planet, right? The thin film of organic life on the planet. Now, when you apply this do, re, mi aspect to it, various things begin to happen. Re gets polluted. All right, you'll see this at some point in time. I'll set this up and demonstrate it, but it begins to become polluted. First, it turns kind of a green, and eventually almost like a dark brown, almost black, because what can't go on up the ray of creation ends up feeding the moon. And you could probably at a certain point in time even drink it as a tea, depending on what you're trying to make there. But it becomes like a really thick, syrupy, dark substance. This idea of the moon kind of taking the unfortunate aspects of people, yeah, and drawing off of those, that's embedded in this concept in here. You get up to Fa, and this is Fa being related to the planets. This is where a bit of a separation happens. Some of the particles that do contain the essential oils don't make it all the way over this kind of curve here. And so they end up coming back down into me and eventually being steamed up again. And if they're lucky, they progress. If not, they trickle back down, they try again, right? And so you've got the whole concept of reincarnation here, of someone not making the grade, in other words, just gone, right? That part of the individual gone, of someone continuing to recycle until they finally make the grade and come over this here. In other words, they have to be just light enough. And you get this idea in Egyptian, Egyptian alchemy of Thoth, weighing the soul against a feather. It has to be light enough to make this transition. I'm not going to go into soul la sido, but I will say that, this rubber hose here that represents the cold water in is the shock, right? The shock that has to go through, because it's something from the outside, just like dough, something from the outside. All right. You can learn so much just by doing it. I didn't read it in a book. All right. I meditated while I was doing the process, and it was just like, wow, it's the same thing. Yeah. It hit me with that kind of inspiration of just how beautiful this type of approach can be, because it's the same process. And the reason why it's the same is because of the adage, as above, so below. Right? If it works there in the laboratory, there is an equivalent process happening in the universe. You understand? And if you understand how to do this here, you understand how the universe is working, and you might even make yourself useful enough to God in creation that, let you manage it, or a certain aspect of it, right? Yeah. This man or this lady knows how the 3 rays of creation work. The custodial, the maintenance. He had the lessons, right? This man knows how those work because he's done the work of it here. Why not, make sure that he's in a job at some point in time where he's wearing the lab coat of creation and helping out with that process. That's the potential here. All right, one more mystery, a couple more mysteries, and then we'll get into how to set this thing up. Yeah. This has to do more with the law of 3 than with anything else. With respect to fire, fire is positive in relationship to air, which becomes negative. In other words, up in the upper atmosphere, right, you've got ions bumping into each other, not you ion, but ions bumping into each other in the ionosphere, creating heat, creating movement, creating the winds. You go outside and it's like blowing 80-mile-an-hour winds. It was doing that here a couple of weeks ago. Incredible. That comes from the sun. Some of it does. Some of it comes from the heating and cooling of the land masses. Yeah, but it's creating this fire is creating movement in air. Now, do you remember the thing that I read when we began about this mover? You want to look at everything as the mover or the moved. Okay, so the fire aspect moves the air aspect around. All right. They're both positive. They're both on this side, aren't they? But fire is more positive, and so it has that ability to create winds, to create movement. Then air becomes positive in relationship to water, which becomes negative. In other words, there is remember when I was talking about this hot, cold, wet, dry, and I said it's a bar? It's not like this is hot, this is cold. It's somewhere on this bar. In respect to water, air is positive and water is negative. Okay, now in respect to earth, water is positive and earth is negative. This is an important concept to meditate upon because it will tell you a lot about the law of 3 and how triangles are continuing to be like it's a moving diagram. It's not a static thing. You don't just draw a triangle and say, well, I mean, you do because you have to teach it this way, right? Positive, negative, and neutral. But it's a moving thing. Yeah. Once it's done with one triangle, it then creates a positive that goes to another negative and creates another neutral that becomes positive, and so on and so forth. This is what Gurdjieff was saying with this whole carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. I'll give you a whole lesson on it at some point in time. But right now, I want you to be aware of this because there are certain phenomenon that is going to happen in your ice cube tray. Okay? I want you to remember it because it will help to explain it in your ice cube tray. Now, shall we get on to the nitty-gritty of the experiment? Here's what you do. Can you see this? You see how I've got, boy, you can see the little bit of copper wrapped around it? Okay. Yeah, it's, I'll give you a hint. This is not the most efficient way, and you'll understand why at some point in time, but it also works, okay? So just wrap a bit of copper around your nail. Now, one thing that you need to know, oftentimes, put it in the right spot here. I'll show you how to arrange it too, but oftentimes when you this will throw you if you're not aware of it. When you get a spool of copper wire, oftentimes they coat it, and they don't tell you that it's coated. Okay, it's coated so that you can control what's shorted and what's not, right? So the easiest way to do to uncoat it, because you're going to need it to be, it's got like a plastic or a something like this on it, yeah. Easiest way is just to get a bit of sandpaper and right, scrape that coating off, and then it's not coated anymore. And if you have a voltmeter or whatever the case is, you're going to set it to what's called the continuity test. All right, and it'll have a little symbol. You probably can't see it here, but it'll have a little symbol that shows a sound, and you want to take. Yeah.
If you hold the things at the same position as your face, and it'll focus in on it. Or it
like
should.
That.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it just looks like a little speaker on most of them. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Boy, this is dating me. This says Radio Shack on it. I don't even use this. when you touch it, look, we'll demonstrate. Now we're getting into demonstration. Okay. When I touch the positive and negative on this copper wire, nothing happens because it's coated. Okay. Right. When you scrape it off, this is how you can test if you've done it right. Just give it like 3 or 4. Then when I touch it, you hear that beep? Yeah, that means that it's now conducting electricity. Okay, so be careful of that. If you got certain kinds of copper wire, they come coated, so be aware of that. All right, you wrap the screws just like I showed you, or the doesn't matter if it's a nail or a screw. What you're looking for is 2 dissimilar metals. All right, what they do is they coat because of something called the galvanic principle. They coat screws with zinc, or nails with zinc oftentimes. And what it does is it allows the elements and the process that we're demonstrating here to attack the zinc instead of attacking the structure of the screw itself. All right.
It creates an anode, basically.
Yeah.
That extra zinc, and then sorry, keep going.
No, it's
sorry
fine.
for interrupting, but that's right.
Yeah, no, fine.
They coat everything that goes marine undersea with zinc to give it more protection against corrosion. It only lasts for a day,
that's why that's why the Statue of Liberty is in grave danger, because it's copper and it's held up by iron bars, right? And those 2 are dissimilar metals. Let me tell you a little bit about metals, okay? Every atom has electrons, right? We know this from grade school. Electrons are these little nebulous clouds that probabilistically surround the nucleus of something. If it has too many, well, first of all, if it has just the right amount on the outer surface, then it's called a noble metal because it doesn't like to give up electrons. Copper is an example of a noble metal. Gold doesn't really react with anything, right? Gold is a good noble metal. Iron.
Because I don't think copper or iron are. Gold is, yes.
Okay.
Copper's highly conductive and also highly corrosive. It's pretty unstable. It gets corroded very quickly. But gold, yes. Gold, silver. Even silver is not, but gold for sure. I think it's gold and a few others. I don't remember, but gold for sure. That's why we make jewelry from gold, because it doesn't go bad easily. Everything else goes bad. Like it changes color. It gets oxidized. Okay,
I stand corrected then. But the point is that some metals, if they're dissimilar metals, in other words, if like between zinc and copper, for example, then there's going to be an ion exchange. There's going to be an electron exchange, okay, between the two. And that's exactly what you're doing here, is you're creating basically a battery out of this. What I'll probably have to do, because it's going to be difficult to show this because it's full of water right now, I was going to show the electricity, but you arrange it in a certain way so that you've got a screw, right, with the copper wire around it on one side, and then the copper wire goes over to the other side, in other words, the other cube tray place, and you've got a screw away from that with the copper wire going to the next one. And so you're creating this kind of chain, this kind of bridge, all right, all the way through. And really what you're making is a battery. Now, you're going to find some interesting things. Measure the voltage. Depending on the quality of your water and how many minerals are in it, you'll get anywhere between 4 and maybe 7 to 9 volts, okay, out of the thing. Not much current. That will be your next project, is to figure out how to light an LED or a light bulb or something like that with it, but you can measure it, all right, just a bit. You know the difference between voltage and current?
No, which is where
Okay.
you need Sam.
Voltage is, you know, a dam, right? A dam where they keep water. Yeah. Voltage is the amount of pressure behind that wall. In other words, if you were to take the wall away, there would be a whole lot of pressure pushing this way, okay? But there's no current because the wall is in place. Current is the amount of water coming through. So if you have a little small crack, right, or a faucet or whatever the case might be, and it just lets a little bit through, that's a little bit of current. If you have a big one where you remove the wall entirely, whoosh, that's a lot of current. So the difference is pressure versus how much is flowing through at a certain point or a certain place. Yeah. Okay. This is called a light emitting diode. It's a fun little thing. What's interesting about it is that it only allows electricity to flow one way. Okay. So if you get one of these, well, first of all, you won't be able to light it off of this because there's just not enough current. You might a little bit. If you put your eye around it, like in the dark, you might see just a tiny bit of a glow in there if you have it connected the correct way. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to build one of these. Look online. I'll give you the picture of how it's arranged. Quite easy to do. Take your voltage measurements and then start experimenting with things like adding vinegar. Add vinegar to it, to the water solution. Okay, you fill each of those with water. Add vinegar to the water solution. Drain it out. Add baking soda would be another one. Okay, what you're doing is you're playing around with these kinds of things, these elements in here, and you're playing around with this aspect, because you'll notice, you know, you squirt a little bit of lemon juice in there, your voltage is going to go up.
You gave it away then.
Huh?
You gave it away then.
Well, okay, right, I did. Glorious, aren't I? Yeah. But what I'm not giving away is I want you to answer for yourself certain questions about how, like, fire, well, first of all, you know, if you add lemon juice, what are you really doing from the fire, air, water, earth type of scenario and the law of 3? What are you really doing? Because you're changing something. Yeah, you're adding either, well, I won't say what elements, but you're adding a certain element into your mixture that's working. Yeah, you get about 4 volts out of it, generally speaking. You add something else, another element into the mix, and what you've done is you've augmented the triangle. You've augmented this cosmic triangle that's happening. Get your answers. Speculate. Okay? Have speculation. Go, you know, I think the vinegar must be this because it all makes sense according to this diagram and what Pierce said about how each of these are positive with respect to something else. All right, and then you can come back and tell me about the law of 3 because you've actually done it. It's quite obvious, isn't it, that the law of 3 is not fundamental. That blew my mind. All right, because I for many years labored under the notion that the law of two was actually not fundamental, and the law of three actually is fundamental. And now I've completely switched up, because I can prove it in a laboratory. I can prove that the law of two is more fundamental than the law of three, because the law of three comes from the law of four, which is two aspects of the law of two. Hmm. Hmm. Back to my jug upstairs. I love that thing because I've got a blanket, a little towel wrapped around it right now because it doesn't like light. It wants to do its best work in the dark, which is great. I feel like I do my best work in the dark sometimes too. But there's such an appreciation and such a love for what's happening in there, because when I look at this jug that's making ethanol, eating the sugar, excreting the ethanol, everything eats, everything excretes. I think of it as like a mini cosmos. Yeah, on my kitchen countertop, little miniature universe on my kitchen countertop, little mini planet where things are in there manufacturing something that wasn't there before. Little life is in there manufacturing something and making little CO2 bubbles, and that's how I can tell that they're alive and thriving, because every couple seconds or so, boop, there goes a little bubble. Boop. Yeah, they're in there doing their thing. Gives me an appreciation. I'm not saying that I feel godlike when I do that, but it gives me an appreciation for what it must feel like for the higher levels of the ray of creation to see a human succeed. Because it's not the first time I did this. The first time I did it, it stalled out. Yeah, it bubbled for about a day and then just stalled out. I don't know exactly what I did wrong. Probably had some proportions wrong or whatever the case is. But it was so disheartening. Makes me wonder how many humans are stalling out, right? And what can be done to improve the ability of humans to fulfill that task that they're here on this planet to do. So I'm sharing this with you because I want you to catch the frequency of the approach rather than, Pierce said to go make a battery out of an ice cube tray. Have fun with it. Catch the frequency of how to approach this work in a way that involves the three centers: the moving center, you're doing something; the thinking center, you're contemplating it; and the emotional center, you're investing in it. Okay. That's the idea. Or get a notebook and start collecting examples of the law too, I guess.
Pierce, I have a thought here. I think just kind of, can we talk open forum, or
Please. Yeah.
I'm contemplating, just taking this example to other things, right? For example, planning a flower bed feels to me that is more emotional there, honestly. But you have to go to Home Depot, you have to buy the seeds, you have to wait for the right season, you have to dig the hole at the right depth, you have to plant it in at the right time, you have to water it, and then you have to wait till the little things it sprouts, and you have to see the flower, and you can cut the flower and put it in your flower vase.
So you
Something
just
like that
described
to me.
1.5 octaves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I went, well, but when that to me also feels almost exactly what this experiment, except this experiment you can get done in a day or 2 days, like what I described as months, possibly. So, and that I think applies to pretty much, any type of creative work. Yeah, as you're saying, music, for example. You think through what your subject is, what you are trying to convey, and then you write the notes, or you play the notes, and then you do it over and over again a few times, and then you're getting emotionally engaged with those notes in that lyric or that song, whatever it is that you're creating over a period of time. Again, longer running than the experiment that you called it out. So
Yeah, and this is the thing, Sachin. This is why I'm saying we're not going to try to do alchemy exactly the way the ancient alchemists did it. We're taking the sentiment of what they were trying to accomplish with it, right? And so we can apply that, like you said, to gardening, to planting a flower. But the point is to make sure that you're in the mix, right? That's the one thing, because a nursery, right, where you buy plants already made, a nursery, may or may not have gardeners that are actually invested in it, right? It might just be a numbers game, especially if it's a big one. Outcome is the same. You still get a ficus or whatever the case is. Yes. It's doing weird things. Okay. You still get your the outcome, but if the person isn't in it, then they didn't get the benefit from it. I really believe that because I go and give this jug, go give it my attention and a certain kind of affection every day, that's the difference between why it's just succeeding so much now and didn't necessarily before. It's not that I didn't before, but it was like, well, frankly, I approached it a bit more like a chemist than an alchemist, because I didn't even know what I was doing the first time through. I just heard that if you mix this and mix that, it does it, right? So I think in Finland they call it kilju, Kilju. It's a beverage that they drink there, but I'm more into the process than drinking sugar wine. Okay.
The camera's on the move.
What's that?
The camera's still on the move.
Yeah, I know. It's going to follow me
Yeah.
around now. Looks like
It's got
I have
more
like
internet
a
thing.
studio and an assistant and everything, right? My film crew is. All right. Are we good? Do you have enough to hit the ground running? I'll post what it looks like. All right. I'll take a picture and stick it up with the video. Easy to do. Just understand. Well, when you get to the last one, you just have to have a small copper wire. All right. So the last one, because there's no screw and I need something to attach it to, I could just stick this directly in, but you just put a little copper wire. Hold on. Now you can see the copper wire. Copper wire into the solution. On the other side of it is the screw combination. And yeah, you understand? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And on, so that's on the anode side, on the positive side. On the negative side, this is outside of the solution. That's it. Connect. Okay. Positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, all the way. It's already doing interesting things in there, by the way. It's been going for a while, and there's like bubbles. And one thing that I want to do with it eventually is put a bunch of them in parallel. I'm going to give it away again, darn it. How you increase the current, okay? You put a bunch of them in parallel. In other words, all the white wires get all connected to all the other white wires. Could be like 6 to 10 of these things. All the red wires all go to the same one. Gives you more current, okay? Then I want to feed that current into a jar, right, with water in it and electrolyte in it, and watch it make hydrogen and oxygen gas.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes. I mean, like triangles. You understand? Because now you've got one triangle driving another triangle. It's then doing hydrolysis, I think is what the term is called, or electrolysis. Actually, electrolysis. Yeah, make hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, and then collect that in a tube and boop, light it on fire and watch it turn back into water. You see the whole thing, the whole aspect of creation is in this. We're gonna have so much fun with it. Okay. Thank you all for joining me today. Enjoy. Hit me up with questions. Try and think in terms of this. Get to understand this through your ice cube tray, or Sachin, even through a plant. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's the same thing. I just try and find unique and interesting ways to do it. Not many I would propose that not many gurus, not that I'm a guru, but not many gurus are out there, telling people to buy ice cube trays and wires and nails and stuff. But it'll help you remember. Yeah, you'll learn something from it, definitely. So, all right, thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. I'm available if you want to chat. Okay.
Thanks.